First of all, you ate 90% of my birthday cake because there was only like a slither left.
A little tiny cupcake.
I can't believe how many interviews I do per month.
Welcome to the Mouthpiece, episode 6, year 1. Today I'm going to talk about shit going on poker Twitter. I'm going to try and keep it brief because we have an amazing interview with 15-time World Series of Poker winner Phil Hellmuth Jr. So stay tuned on the Mouthpiece. Okay, welcome to the Mouthpiece, episode 6, year 1. Today I'm going to chime in on the Markup Police. Yes, that's it. Mr. Sean Deeb and his insanity harassment about people getting markup in poker. This literally started over Alan Kessler charging 0.05 markup. What does he think, that people don't have to pay their bills or something? Even Alan Kessler's worth 1.05. No offense, Alan. I'm not trying to take a shot at you there, but I think it's just pretty bad. I'm gonna go out and really say how I feel. First of all, we live in a capitalist country. I know a lot of you out there want to make this a communist socialist country, but as long as it's a capitalist country, you get to charge what you kind of want and what the market bears. I like to make a comparison for people out there that think that charging absurd amount of markup is wrong. Most people that are buying pieces on UStake or Stake Kings are looking to have action on their favorite players at the World Series of Poker, and most of them are paying like $40 to $50. I think the average person that buys a piece of me or Hellmuth or anybody is probably buying like $40 or $50 worth, and then they pay $65 or $75 for a $50 piece. Now you have to just ask yourself this: when you go to an NBA playoff game or an NHL hockey playoff game, chances are the price on that ticket is $450, or if you want to sit up front, it's $1,000. But lo and behold, you want that front row ticket, and on StubHub it's going for $2,000. That's 100% markup. You rightfully go out and you buy that ticket without any hesitation, and you tell all your friends what a great time you had at the game. Well, that's the same thing with people who are investing in poker players at markup. Somebody like me, who has spent years with marketing my brand, somebody like Phil Hellmuth, who has spent years marketing his brand, I could go out and say, I charge a little bit, maybe more markup because, well, I'm not doing too well since I've had my surgery. But even if I was doing well, I would charge the same amount. I don't really think it means anything about what I think I'm worth as far as the mixed games at the World Series of Poker. I've smashed them every single year. I've had basically 3 losing years in my life. Once was 2009 when I had a bad breakup with some girl, and it was the worst year of poker I ever had. And the other was when I got sick in 2014. And then the following year, 2015, when my body wasn't healed, and on day 2s I would wilt and make mistakes because I was in a lot of pain. So I blamed that on myself in 2015. 2014, I just knew something was wrong with me. I kept saying there's something neurologically wrong with me because I'm playing awful. And sure enough, there was something neurologically wrong with me. I had a 7mm disc going through my spinal cord. So except for those 3 years, I profited at the World Series of Poker. So I have no problem, playing the World Series of Poker and charging. I'll charge a 1.5 on all Omaha 8 or better events. I'll charge 1.5 on the main event, which probably should be even more. Charge like 1.5 3 in like the deuce to 7 tournaments, even though I've final tabled the triple draw 10K 2 years ago and finished 14th last year, in which I had like 3-1 chip lead over the field with 16 people to go, and found a way to finish 14th because I made an 8 like 6 times in a row, and they made a better 8 or 7 like all 6, and that was pretty upset to me. So, I know that I played that game tournament really good. It might be actually one of my worst cash games, but in tournament, I understand it a lot more than a lot of people do. It's a completely different game in tournament, and I really like the way I play deuce to 7 triple draw. I also like the way I play deuce to 7 no limit. I won that tournament in 2008. It was the last time they had rebuys for $5,000. I was in that tournament for one buy-in. And I won $586,000. I've also cashed that tournament 2 other times. I haven't played it the last 2 years because the tournament has got really tough, and the fact that I don't feel my edge is that big in that tournament. I might play it this year, but if I do, I will charge very little markup. But as far as any Omaha 8 or Stud 8 or better tournament, I believe in my heart I'm the best in the world in both, and especially in tournaments, and I'm going to charge what I feel I'm worth. Now, these people going out and trying to knock Phil or knock people charging markup, these are just jealous people that just mostly can't get what they're charging for markup. And the only reason why Sean Deeb couldn't get what some people are charging for markup is because people hate him. I mean, if he was well-liked, he would be able to charge whatever he wanted, because I respect Sean a lot. I think he's one of the best all-around poker players in the world, and I have no problem saying it. As well as me and Sean, people say, well, you and Sean don't get... No, me and Sean get along fine. Matter of fact, when I kind of chimed in on Twitter and he kind of was jumping back at me, I didn't really want that to go public because we have a pretty good relationship. And so I texted him and I told him how I felt about it. We texted back and forth and everything. And like he said, I'm glad you text me, because we have a lot of respect for each other. But he did, like he said to me, I am an asshole. And I have no problem saying I'm an asshole. I like being an asshole. So with that said, I'm sure Sean will not be upset at me when I say, Sean, you're an asshole, because Sean wants people to think he's an asshole. But I do think he took it too far. I let him know about it. I thought him getting personal with Daniel was way out of line, no matter what he felt about it. If he's going to go and dig personal about it, you just don't go to Twitter, no matter how big an asshole you are. I just don't feel that was the place or time. But with that being said, with the people out there that can see both sides of the equation, I ask themselves, right now, no matter what anybody says, the poker economy is not very good. Maybe the tournament economy is a little bit better, but like so many people are being staked and are in big makeup with the people they're being staked with. And anytime we could bring more people into the interest of poker, into wanting to watch poker, I have no problem charging whatever markup the market will bear. Just like when you put your ticket up on StubHub, if you have season tickets and you can't make the game, you put it up for a certain price, and whatever they're willing to pay, they pay. That's called a capitalist society. So, number one, it's a capitalist society. Number two, we're bringing more people into the game for a minuscule amount of money. You have to understand, the people that are paying 1.5 and a 10K markup for half are not spending $7,500 for half. There might be one or two people that might pay $1,250 or whatever, but most of the people usually get about 100, 200 people are putting up $50 to $75, and they get to tell their friends they actually have a piece of Mike Matusow or Phil Hellmuth or whoever else is out there charging markup that they want to sweat during the World Series. And that is a good thing, okay? There's one thing when you buy a piece of a player at poker shares. And then there's another thing of actually buying an actual piece of that player. Because when I know somebody has an actual piece, and I know Phil feels the same way, I try even harder for these young kids that put up $75 for 1% or whatever it is, because if I win that 1%, whether it's worth like $2,000, $3,000, I mean, this puts a big smile on people's faces. This changes like their lives for even if it's only for 1 or 2 days. I'm all about putting a smile on their face. And if they lose, so they lost $75 or 50, $60. It's like people have to see the big picture about bringing more people into the interest of watching poker. And is there some people that charge markup that are no names, that it's tough to sell their packages, and to go out and bash them for it? Like, hey, that's fine. They're struggling in the poker world also and trying to make a living. So I don't think you should ever bash anybody, even if they're a no name that's trying to charge whatever markup they're trying to charge, because hey, if somebody will pay it, then God bless them, But I'm really going to stand with me, with Phil, with Daniel on this. Can't believe me and Daniel agree on something so strongly, which is what we used to always. But that's always good to know. And I believe strongly that the market, it's what the market bears. So that's my thought of what's been going on in poker this week and on the poker police. And we're going to turn this over now because this is a long interview. We're going to turn this over with my good friend, Phil Hellmuth Jr. Let's hear what Phil has to say.
The Mouthpiece.
If you'd like to take part in our phone call segment, you can give us a call at 702-329-0480. And if you're a snowflake or a pussy and you don't want to talk to me, you can email me at mouthpiecepodcast@gmail.com. Also, follow me at the Mouth Matiso on Twitter for times that our call-in segment will be live. If you haven't been lucky enough to catch us during our live phone call segments, keep in mind that you can call me at any time and leave a voicemail with your questions. I'll answer them on the show. So let's take some voicemails now from our listeners.
Hey, Mel. This is Lisa from Brooklyn, New York. And first I want to say thank you because of you, Jen Hartman, Phil Hellmuth, and Kid Poker. I got into poker, watching Poker After Dark. And I want to say thank you. That was back in 2008. So thanks for that. My question is, I read your book. And my question is, when you were in the joint, besides cooking, did you continue on playing poker? And how was the transition with your poker from the joint, if you did, and back to the casino? So hope to hear.
That's a great question.
Happened. Thank you. Bye.
Lisa, that's a great question. When I was in jail for 6 months for something I didn't do, by the way, but I took the rap because they didn't want to take a chance of me getting a bad jury and then me having to spend 10 years in jail for something I didn't do. So I took the 6 months because they talked me into it and I didn't want to do it. But that's beside the point. When I was in there, everybody knew who I was. This is before poker really blew up. It was 04. It was right after. It was right kind of like the beginning of the poker boom. Moneymaker was 03. And I went in 04 for 6 months. So they had an idea who I was. But what we did is we played spades or mostly a game called Casino. I used to play Casino when I was like 5, 6 years old, my grandpa and stuff. But I had forgotten the rules, and then they told me the rules again. And I smashed everybody playing Casino. Like, I literally took this one guy's commissary money every single week. And then so whatever commissary he got for that week, I got it all, and then I just gave it away to other inmates because that's just what I did. I was I was lucky. You get $90 in commissary twice a week, so I would get that twice a week. And if anybody out there doesn't know what commissary is, it's basically you get to order chips, cookies, kind of beef jerky, just all the normal stuff you'd have on the outside. And most people in jail, none of them have any money, and so they have to eat that crappy food. And I think I might have ate about 10 meals in the 6 months there. So most of the time I gave away my food to everybody, and they would get double portions, and then I'd eat the commissary. So, but when I beat these guys out of all their commissary, then I'd give it all of my friends in there, and then whatever commissary they wanted something, I'd always share with them. And that's why I was probably the most well-liked person probably ever in the history of somebody who was in jail. And if somebody fucked with me, I mean, they would kill them. I mean, I was like untouchable because I was good to everybody, and I feel good about being good to everybody. So basically, when I was in jail, it was basically I beat him in a game called Casino every week, and I literally beat this guy out of his commissary something like 7 weeks in a row, and he would get like $50 worth. And we'd all laugh about it, and so like my next door guy, I'm like, don't worry, you got plenty of commissary going this week. I beat so and so out of all, and they all knew I beat him out of it. So when his commissary came, I'd give it to him and the guy next to him, and that's kind of what I did. So, that's the answer to that. But thanks, Lisa. Thanks for calling and checking in.
Yeah, g'day, Mike. Long time fan, mate. It's good to hear you having such a good time. Just wondering what your opinion is on the bracelet being bought at the Aussie Millions by Bryn Kenny. I think it's on its way to destroying the integrity of the game. I understand he's a highly ranked player and GPI and all that bullshit. But, do you think this is right? And do you think there is anything that should be done about it? Because why can't 20 people just decide to split and then chop the bracelet to pieces and hock it to each other? Thanks, mate.
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I didn't know about that, but I do believe that's terrible. I believe you should, if you make a split, whoever many people made the split, once you play the tournament out and you get head up, and you play for the bracelet. I always believe that you should leave at least $10,000 and the bracelet or the trophy up top, minimum, and everything else you chop is fine. So if that's what happened, I think it's wrong, and I have tremendous respect for Bryn Kenny as a poker player. I think he is one of the best all-around poker players in every game, from top to bottom, I ever played with. And I every time I've told him that, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I don't say that about many people, but if that's what happened, I will say that that was wrong on his part, and I'll have no problem calling it out. So I hope that doesn't happen with anybody else. I hope that people stay honest and don't do things like that. So that's my opinion.
The Mouthpiece.
Welcome to the Mouthpiece. Today, one of my best friends and the all-time World Series poker bracelet winner, Mr. Phil Hellmuth. Mr. Phil Hellmuth, how you doing, Phil?
I'm doing great, Mike. I'm your only friend.
Well, yeah, you are my only friend. That's a good point. Yeah, you are my only friend in poker. You know, I used to have a lot of friends in poker when I had a lot of money, and then all of a sudden they were all gone, and well, that's why they call you.
Once you're broke and you need their help, they all disappear.
Wait. That's why they call you an idiot, Phil, because you're still my friend, you know. So, but that's okay. That means a lot. Our friendship means a lot to me, and I hope it does the same to you. So, Let me ask something. I started playing poker in 1996. You won the World Series in 1989. What got you into poker?
Well, I was going to college at the University of Wisconsin, and I found this poker game. They were playing this weird game called Texas Hold'em, you know. Mostly, actually, they were playing Pineapple, but it was no limit.
Okay.
So Pineapple is where you start with 3, and then you fold one after the flop. And so I started playing. I mean, I graduated, Mike. You know, I started at this game where it was a 10-cent ante. I'm talking about one person ante 10 cents. Not everybody at the table. Then the action would start. So
this is great.
People would have $20, $30 in front of them, you know, $40, $50. The rich taxi driver who thought he was a great poker player always bought in for $60, the high roller.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we had a prominent psychiatrist play with us. And
was that your wife?
Eventually.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Go ahead.
And eventually, he invited me to his game, which I kind of called the Doc's game.
Okay.
And so there I was, 20 years old, and it was like two professors, a prominent doctor, a famous lawyer. You know, there were like 7 or 8 of us. No one in that game was under the age of 40, and I was 20. And I started shredding that game. That was a big game because dealer anteed $1 or 50 cents. But the buy-ins, he would give you coupons when you sat down for $500.
Wow.
And so it was easy to keep track of whose coupons were in it was kind of a nice system, considering sometimes when we write down the buy-ins ourselves, it's off 5 or 10,000, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a nice system. You could buy in, and they'd buy in for, the doctor would buy in for 500, the high roller, and one of the professors would buy in 100, and then this other character named Thule Haramy, who became my best friend, was just a genius of a guy at UNLV. He was getting paid $25 an hour in the late 70s, early 80s to program their computers. And so I learned a lot from him, and he'd buy in 50. And so I always believed in the min buys.
Right.
And, that game was outrageous. And to me, as a 20-year-old, I didn't even know how to process it. I was taught that education was really important. And here I was shredding these PhDs and JDs and MBAs and shredding them. And so I felt pretty cool. And I remember, fast forward a year and a half, 2 years later, when I was 22, I remember I won $2,600 in one night in the game because I would set people off a little bit I'd show them a bluff. I'd bluff $10 into, Mike, you wait for the perfect spot to bluff, and I'd bluff 10 or 50 or whatever, or 100. And that was the time they'd fold, and I'd show it. And back then, you weren't a man. If you got bluffed, you weren't a man. And then they'd call me all night. And I'd bet 200 with the nuts, 300 with the nuts, 150 with the nuts, and call. It was kind of a very easy game for someone like me who learned games quickly.
And for most people out there that don't understand is this Phil at 18 years old, and when I was 18, 20. Well, shit. When I was 18, 19, 20, $100 was $1 million. I mean, oh, I got a couple $100. Oh, it's we didn't know that probably what was to come or what was like to win big money or whatever.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're talking 1984, 1985,
right.
And
I was still in high school.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember, Mikey, I looked up one day and all of a sudden I'd paid off my student loans and I had $20,000 in the bank. I'm like, what is this? I mean, how did this happen? And, that was right before my first fall.
Right.
And the fall came when I started going to Vegas to play. Oh. And of course, heck, I had bad habits, man. I mean, I would wake up at 2 in the afternoon every day and I would play with my friends once or twice a week max, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would never go to bed. So if once the game started, I would just stay till I busted everybody. Or I'd stay till 6, 7, 8 in the morning. And I never had to quit a game because everybody else quit. And so I had so I got to Vegas, and I remember my first session I played for 50 hours or something, you know.
Well, now we're talking about things we can relate with. Okay.
2040, it was 2040, you know, stud 8 or better.
Right.
And the game was at the Dunes, which is where the Bellagio is now. And
right.
the first time I ever sat down in a game, it was New Year's Eve, and I sat down and I sat next to Telly Savalas, and I mean, man, he was a megastar. That was Kojak.
I remember. It wasn't he on. Wait, he was on Hawaii 5-0 or something, right? Oh, Jack. Yeah.
Kojak was Joe, but he was in a ton of movies. He was a big
he's a big
actor.
star. He was big. Yeah, I remember that.
And I sit down to him the first time I ever played poker. I sit down next to Telly Savalas. And I just remember him telling me, you know...
Hold it. So everybody, Phil's first name drop was Telly Savalas. This is great. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, Mike, yeah, you're really encouraging of my stories.
No, this is great.
So, I mean, he had a tuxedo on. I think he was paid to be there, you know, and he had a young wife and a really young baby. And I remember he just wanted to play poker. You know, they kept coming down, telling him his wife, you got to go upstairs. He'd delay. The guy just wanted to play poker. He left at like 11 p.m., as I recall, and he was back in his seat by like 12:30.
And this was 19 what? Before you won the main event, 88, 87? What was that?
No, man, you're talking about 1985.
Oh, 85, okay.
Yeah, you're talking about like New Year's Eve, 1985. So,
right.
And no, I mean, it was so there I was. I mean, it was just kind of a weird thing to play with Telly, and I remember him telling me, "Kid, you and I are the fish." And I remember thinking, I'm not a fish. I'm a professional poker player. And I probably wanted to brag a little bit how I'd won my little 20,000 in Madison or whatever. And
wow. So
you
the
know,
first person that called
you
Phil
and I are the fish.
Fish was Telly Savalas. So now when they
in the
there,
stud 8 or better game, in that 2040 game, I was the fish. You know, those guys were good, man. I mean, you know, you had the one thing you learn, Mike, quickly you're not raised in Vegas like you, is Vegas was filled with hometown champions.
Right.
And so all the hometown champions would come and play each other, and so it was a great learning experience. I got better quickly. Yeah.
So try and tell the listeners, when you entered the main event in 1989, that was before my time. I mean, I didn't become a professional until 96. What went through your mind when you entered the main event, and what were your emotions when you won it? Can you remember those probably pretty vividly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was 24 years old.
Okay.
So by then I was a professional poker player. Actually, if you go back to 1988 in May, I was in Vegas, and people are like, oh, this is a World Series of Poker thing. I was playing cash games.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, I'd never heard of it. And yet it was right across town. And I went and I played, and I remember I finished like 5th in the stud 8 or better tournament, because that's the game I'd been playing a lot of. And I was really depressed because, you know, I had like my board, I'll never forget, my board was 6, 7, 8, 9. And I had 2 pair, and I bet it. And on the river, I hit a 4 across, so I made 9s full. So, I hit a...
either a straight or a 9s full, right?
No, sorry, I had it wrong. I had 9s and 6s, and the river was a 2 across.
Okay.
And so I either made an 8 high straight. I already made a 9 high straight with an 8 low, I guess I'm trying to say, right? Is that right?
That makes sense, okay.
Anyway, and I got check raised for my last bet. And the guy had the wherewithal, Lance somebody or another, had the wherewithal. He actually had aces up and made a really good check raise. And I was just sick that I'd bet it without looking at the card. And, you know, I guess I take it back. My board was 5, 6, 7, 8. And I hit a 4 across on the river. So I either made a 9 high straight or a blank, but I still bet the 2 pair.
Gotcha.
Which was probably, it was a good bet, but he made a really great raise, seeing that I couldn't re-raise him. And you would probably recognize the guy if you saw him. So then I entered the main event that year. You know, a kind of a catastrophic, like the Sunday before, I didn't have the money, and I won a super satellite, which in those days was a seat plus $6K in cash.
Right.
I hopped into a 100-200 game, with a famous mobster, and I mean, this guy had a guy standing next to him with a gun. That was the only time I didn't do the Phil Hellmuth act. No whining there. I was too scared.
I don't blame you.
And Mikey, literally, I talk about this in my autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
I started that day, with on day 2 of the 5,000 limit hold'em, and I traded pieces with Val Carpenter, I think his last name is. Mm-hmm. And so then I went and won my super for 16K, and we traded like 20%. Well, he won the tournament, so he gave me another 20K. Now I had 36. Then I hopped in the 100-200 game and won another 18. I had 54,000 before the day ended.
And that was limit hold'em you jumped in, correct?
Yeah, limit.
And I try and tell people there was really not much limit back then. It was all limit except for the main event of the World Series. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I was playing way over my head. I mean, in the 100.
Oh, I've never done that.
I was playing. So in the main event, I run it up near the chip lead, and I remember, I'll never forget, the board came ace, king, queen of spades. I had 2 red 8s, mm-hmm. and then the deuce of spades, and I made a big bet. Someone bet, and I raised him. Mm-hmm. And then on the river, the deuce paired, and I went for it again, and he just called me down with aces and kings.
Oh, my.
And then somebody told me that's Johnny Chan. He won it in 87. He's defending champion.
Right.
And then we made the money. But back then, making the money meant 7,500, not 10K. So the final 36 got paid. I think I finished 32nd, and I was all in with 10s against Chan's jacks, and it came 7, 8, 9, blank, blank. And,
right.
And I was sick to my stomach because first place was a lot of money.
And that was the year that Chan won back-to-back. That was 88, correct?
Yeah, he went on to win it, and I remember my friend Big Al Emerson started shouting at me, "What the fuck? How could you blow this tournament? What were you thinking? You bluff off all your money to Johnny Chan." He said, "You're never going to have another chance to win a World Series of poker bracelet. It might take you 10 years." And I looked him straight in the eyes, and I said, "I'm going to be back here, and I'm going to go deep every year." I mean, and
that's the Phil I know. That's it.
In 1989, I came back and I won it, and I faced Johnny Chan heads up. But by then, I told my dad I was going to win it. I told the whole world I was going to win it. Mm-hmm. My answering machine message before I went out there was, "I'm going to win it."
That's
and
good.
so, I just had all this confidence. Plus, I'd won the Bicycle Club main event in August of '88, mm-hmm. which was a big one. There were like four tournaments a year you wanted to win. And there were like 11 World Series tournaments you wanted to win.
Right.
And there were like 4 or 5 or 6 Hall of Fame tournaments you wanted to win.
Right.
And so I won the main event at the Bike in '88 in August. And then I was chip leader at the final table of the Hall of Fame main event. And I blew it. Mm-hmm. I just completely blew that one. And Chan won that one. So Chan had won the '87 Hall of Fame main event, the '88 Hall of Fame main event, the '87 World Series of Poker main event, and the '88. So basically, he had won the 4 biggest tournaments.
Right.
And now I'm facing him in 1989, heads up. And I felt like I was a better Hold'em player than he was.
Right.
A better no-limit Hold'em player. He did some things that I thought were wrong. Mm-hmm. And I played no limit all the time, and he played a lot more limit, stud, and other games. And I felt like I had the advantage when I got heads up with him. And after about, 20 minutes in, I leaned over and I said, "You're going to have to play perfect poker and get lucky to beat me." So only he could hear.
That's my man, Phil. Always talking shit.
And then, at the 32-minute mark of heads up, I had 9s and he had ace-7 of spades. And my dad had flown in to watch the event. Mm-hmm. My dad, father of 5, mm-hmm. hated gambling, hated poker, had finally convinced him that, and so he flew in. And so the sweetest thing about that was that I had 9, Shannon had ace-7 of spades, 4 hands before. And I'll tell you the hand, Mike. 4 hands before I'd raised with ace-7 of diamonds. I raised the blinds for 5-10. I made it 35K, 3.5x. Chan raised 130 more. Called the 35. Huge overbet. And I'm like, he doesn't have anything. But I'm not making a stand with ace-7 suited like everybody else. I'm going to wait.
Right.
4 hands later, I opened for 35, and I just could see it coming. He's going to re-raise 130, and I'm going all in. Mm-hmm. And the minute he put the 130 in there, I said, "I'm all in," for effectively $655,000 for him. Mm-hmm. and I had about 1.2 million. He studied for 3 minutes, and he called within 7 of spades.
Wow.
And
you had?
I just remember I had 2 black nines. I remember I was 2.5 to 1 before the flop, and I remember that I was almost exactly the same with 1 to come.
Right.
Now the board was like king, king, queen, 10. You know, and they turned like a black 6 on the river, and I was just like in shock because, you know, I was in shock. I wasn't really expecting it, and I just figured he'd outdraw me because that's what Chan did in those days. I mean, he got it in bad in those championships a lot when he was heads up.
Right.
Don't misunderstand me. He's a great player, but when he's in with ace-10 against ace-jack against Jesse Alto, and he hit the 10, there'd been like 3 of those, and so I was like. So I was a little in shock. I was preparing to sit back down and battle for another 4 hours or whatever it took. And all of a sudden, I'd won it, and you can go to the internet at YouTube, and it shows me throwing my hands up twice and kind of looking up at the sky, a lot of excitement. And then I turn around, and my dad's coming running up the aisle. And I gave him a big hug, and I bought him a new Mercedes. And I took a private jet home, my first private jet ride ever.
Oh, that's cool.
It was like $6,300, you know, and my dad wasn't on the jet because he talked me out of spending the $6,300. But I told all my friends, I'm going to win it and fly you guys back on a jet. And I'm like, I have to do it.
Somebody asked me, we had a question that came in, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I want to know if you remember it. When this came from, well, doesn't say the person's name, but it was a question that was asked, and it was asked to both of us. It says, do you remember the first time that me and you played poker together, and when we met, and what your impressions were of me, what my impressions were of you, and it says, could there be some good stories there? Well, I remember the first time we played, and I want to know, since somebody asked this, because I remember the first hand we played. Do you remember the first hand we played and the first hand you met me?
No, I mean, come on, Mike. You know, I mean, at that point.
Okay, well, it's easier for me.
It's
easier for me to remember because you were Phil Hellmuth, and you were a famous poker player, and I had just become a professional, and it was my first World Series event. So I'll go out on the record then and say it was 1997. It was the first limit hold'em event of the World Series. Well, back then, that was the biggest tournament except for the main event. Well, now it's bigger than the main event. It was probably the biggest tournament in the world. We'd get like 600 players, I think it was, for the limit hold'em event.
5,000 limit hold'em.
Okay, yeah, no. So this was the first event. This was the 1,100 limit hold'em. We had like 656 players, I think it was.
Probably, if you looked it up, you'd see it was a 1,500 buy-in. But
maybe
continue.
Whatever. And I'll never forget the hand because you had raised, and I re-raised you, and you had raised under the gun with ace-8 of diamonds, and then you called, and then it came an ace, and you check-raised me, and I re-raised you, and you called me down. You didn't know who I was, and I had ace-king, and I'm like, so this is the great Phil Hellmuth? He plays ace-8 under the gun, calls a re-raise. This is what I was thinking to myself. Then pays me off. I go, and then you berated me, by the way. And I'm like, and then he has the audacity to berate me. I'm like, fuck him. I'm fucking better than him. By the way, that was all I was thinking to myself. That was the first hand I played with you and I remember it vividly. I never did tell you all that because you know we always became good friends. But it was the first time since I became a pro where I said to myself, you know what, I could play with the best. It's kind of like when you play with Johnny Chan and you said, fuck him, I'm better than him in no limit hold'em. I could beat him. Well, that was like I didn't even play. I'd never played no limit at the time. So when I beat you that hand, that was the first time I said to myself, I could play with the best.
I mean, so if you go to the putting green and you make a putt and Tiger misses one, you just think, now I want to beat him at golf.
No, but
is that the way you are, Mike?
No, but I was.
If you go to a free throw game, if you go to a free throw line and you're playing with Michael Jordan, and he misses a free throw, but you hit yours, now you think I'm as good as Michael Jordan.
But I knew how good I was, so I was. So this kind of like validated my thought process of how good I was, and I do believe in the first 3 years playing pro that I was top 5 limit hold'em players in the world. I say it now, and I probably not even the top 10,000 now. I mean, it's like everybody plays limit hold'em good, but back in the days, people like you, people like me, like if you were aggressive, you won a lot of money stealing. I mean, I used to have, when I'd have bad days at limit hold'em and run bad, I'd still break even because I'd steal myself even. So you could relate with that. What I'm saying there. So
there was like that. I think that I have 3 bracelets in limit hold'em, and I think David Shue might have 3 also. Yeah. And last year I had a real shot in the 10K. I remember I had 500,000. Probably 6 hours into day 2, right. and maybe 600,000. And I was just playing great poker, and I remember how frustrated I was. That still sticks out in my mind. Somebody hit a belly buster on me. It came ace jack 4, and he called me down with king 10 and hit a queen, and I had a set of jacks. And then I started barking, what the blah, blah, blah. And of course that became a thing, because whenever I lose it now, it's so infrequently that when I do lose it, everybody starts tweeting, the press runs over, everybody gets the story. So whenever I have one moment of poker brat moment, and I remember that one, and it just really hurt. Yeah. And I remember, I remember I had such a great shot in that event, and I think it was, our world champion from a few years ago won it, Joe McKeon. Yeah. Hell of a player. He beat me a big coin flip pot.
That was the 10K. That was 2 years ago, correct? Or was that last year?
Yeah, that had to be. Yeah, I guess you're right. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, because I had not played a limit hold'em tournament at the World Series in about 7 years. I jumped in the 6 max limit hold'em. I think it was like 2,200 or maybe 3,000 last year, and they're like, "Oh, don't jump in that, Mike. Those are all the greatest limit hold'em players in the world." And I'm just like, it's like riding a bike. How good can they be? And I remember I finished 23rd, right? And we were playing like 5 and 10 or 6 and 12,000 blinds, and my stack was 23,000. I had never gotten over 40,000 at any point in the tournament, and they were all waiting for me to go broke. Like I think they paid like 36, and they're like, people who had 500,000-600,000 stacks were already broke, and I had moved up to 23rd. I finished 23rd, and I really consider it one of the top 5 tournaments I ever played. I mean, like, for one bet, I folded in a spot that nobody would fold, and I would beat, and this happened like 3 times. I would have gone broke, and you can relate with that.
It's interesting, Mike. I look at you and Daniel down to 1 and 2 bets in these limit tournaments deep all the time, 1, 2, or 3 bets.
Right.
And all of a sudden, boom, boom, you have a lot of chips. And I do remember in that tournament that I blew my last 2 bets, big bets, maybe 3 big bets, but call it 2.5 bigs. And I was really upset with myself because I'd watched Sean Deep down to one or 2 bigs, and he'd made a big comeback, and he's the one that ended up busting me. And yeah, I do remember that hurt. I remember there was another limit hold'em where I just felt like I was so far the best player in the world that when I finished like 13th, I was just like stunned. I mean, the stuff that everybody else was doing back then was just ridiculous. Maybe it was 02 or 03 or 04.
They're even worse now. I'm like, I told myself after last year, I will never miss another limit hold'em event again, because everybody tries to outplay everybody, and because there's no antes, you just need to play solid, and you just need to, if you get a hole of chips, you get aggressive. But I mean, if you're short, you don't have to like jump in there and protect yourself out of position with hands that could, really hurt you. But I learned a lot from that tournament and not playing for a long time. And, I remember that limit hold'em tournament that you're talking about because Joe McKeon won it. Sorrel Mizzi had all the chips. I just happened to walk up to the table when it was three-handed, and it went, McKeon had raised, Sorrel had 3-bet, and Sorrel had pocket jacks. And the flop came Jack 7.
Oh, that was cold, man. It came Jack 10-7 and then Ace-Ace.
Yeah, it came Ace-Ace. And it just gutted Sorrel. And I was watching the hand.
Well, because McKeon had like Ace-10 offsuit, right?
He had Ace-7 offsuit. And
he had Ace-7 offsuit. Yeah. McKeon did, yeah.
Yeah, and the funny part was like he raised like Sorrel on the flop, gets re-raised, called, and then ace on the turn, and then fucking gets 3 more bets in, and then gets the. It was just pretty gross, but I felt
2
for
bets on the river too. Yeah, that was really sick.
I felt for Sorrel, and I said, okay, Sorrel, I'm going to walk away now. I must be bad luck for you. And I left, and I got on my little scooter and walked away, or drove away. So let me, we're going to touch a little bit on the 2001 final table that me and you were at. And if people don't remember, it was my first World Series main event final table. I had started playing No Limit Hold'em in 1999. I kind of tell the story, and then all of a sudden my goal was kind of like Phil's, where I want to win the main event. It was the only goal I had.
That's everybody in poker in the 90s, their number one goal was to win the main event. Everybody.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't play any No Limit till 99. I've told the story about how I watched Stewie in 97 outside in was it April, and we had a.
But go back to 01, Mike.
Yeah.
You had Carlos, me, you.
Yeah. It was a really stacked final table. It was me, Carlos,
and Daniel had finished like 10th or something.
11th. Daniel finished 11th, and we were all pulling for Daniel because we're all good friends, and I wanted Daniel to make the final table. But
Dewey Tomko was down there.
Dewey Tomko, Phil Gordon, and there was.
Oh God. What Phil Gordon did to me in that tournament. Oh my God!
And I've always told the story about how like I never left the house for 3 months after that tournament because I really my goal was to stay away from you, stay away from Dewey, and then focus on Carlos if I could pick up a tell on him, which I did, and then I didn't follow through on it, and he showed me the big bluff, and then I picked up 8s against kings, small blind against your big blind. That was cooler number 1. Were you the one that busted me? Or that you're the one who crippled me. Do you remember that? I'm trying to remember.
No.
But okay. I think you're the one that crippled me. 8s against kings, small blind, big blind, and then somebody else busted me. I'll have to look it up, but you could have been the one that busted me, but I don't think so because I would have remembered if you were the one that busted me. I remember you crippled me. But people don't realize that was probably at the time the most stacked, probably WSOP final table ever.
It was really stacked. I just remember, and I have a lot of pain from that. I'll never forget. There's a couple hands I won't ever forget. And one of them was, Phil Gordon had this weird thing where every time I raised, he just moved in. He just kept putting in mountains of money.
I remember.
And it was just crazy. So then it's like he had this thing. It's like, I'm going to get Hellmuth. He had this weird fixation on me. And
he did.
You remember that?
And he used to always talk about it.
Sure did.
Yeah.
And he'll admit that, too.
I know. I remember.
Now Phil Gordon and I are great, but back then he had this weird fixation, just kept going all in. So finally I picked up 9s on the button. Red 9s, or black 9s, red 9s, whatever they were. And I thought, all right, I'm raising and he's moving in and I'm going to snap it off. Mm-hmm. And so I opened for whatever, 30, 40,000. He was all in for 600,000. I snap called him. Mm-hmm. And he flips over. I did at black 9s. He had 2 red 6s. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, wow, and you probably don't remember this, but that's going to give me a chip lead. It's going to be Carlos and I are going to be the 2 chip leaders.
I was out already. I had already let Carlos bluff me for most of my chips, and then I got cooler, so I missed all that. So
anyway, it comes 6-7 king, and I was just like, are you kidding me? in the biggest moment of my life. This guy's been moving all in me for 2 days straight. Every time I put a chip on the pot, he's forced me to play no hands. And doesn't he know that when I finally do play a hand? So that was number one. And then number two, I think, if you look back at the video, he'll say something like, he'll admit, he does actually say, wow, I got really lucky, and there was another hand I called him down with third pair, like for 500,000 or something, and he was just like in shock. And he's like, how did you know? And I'm like, I don't know, but I knew. And so now this is the one that messed me up, Mike, and it was, you were in this hand. I had king 10 offsuit, and I decided I was limping on the button. And this hand, no one's ever talks about this, unless you read my autobiography. King 10 offsuit on the button, and I decided I'm going to limp. And because Phil Gordon's just, every time I raise, he goes crazy. And the blinds were 15, 30,000. And you limped in front of me. And I'm like, Mike's thinking the same thing I am. I'm like, Mike has exactly king queen. And so it turned out that you had exactly king jack, and I made a great read. And so I folded. I studied for an extra minute because my chips were already in front of me. And I'll never forget it. The flop comes king, king, queen. You had king jack, I had king 10, and Phil Gordon, who was kind of a rank amateur, had queen jack offsuit. And so Phil Gordon leads out, you smooth call. At that point, I would have probably smooth called because I would have been afraid that you had a king.
Right.
You
were out. You got out before the flop, though, right?
Folded before the flop.
Correct. I remember. I remember the hand. Correct.
Turn is a 10, and Phil Gordon, I think, checked and you checked, or maybe he bet and you called.
Yeah.
And then all I remember is the river, he bet 200,000. I'm going to say 200, and you raised 200.
Oh, he raised. Yeah, I didn't raise. I remember that now. Okay.
You made a really good raise, and he just paid it off with queen jack, just gave you like 300,000 or 400,000 for no reason.
That's how I got a lot of chips. I remember that now.
And I was sick. There I had king 10, and I knew exactly what was going to happen. Phil was going to bet the flop. You and I are both going to call it. 10 pops off. And now I'm a little still worried about king queen, but I think because of the 10, I think you're going to bet and I'm going to smooth call.
Right.
But even if that doesn't happen, if you check, I'm betting. But I'm going to price Phil in, of course, for like 100.
It's funny you brought this hand up. I remember it now. I didn't remember it, but now I remember it like it was yesterday because we were talking about the hand afterwards, how you'd folded the king 10 and what an idiot Phil was, and he paid me off. I remember this hand now. So you have to tap into my brain dead gabapentin / fucking shit that I'm on. So
that one hurt Mike, because if my 9's hold up, I have the chip lead. If I play the king 10, I'm going to have a massive chip lead. And so to end up finishing 5th in the main event, and I believe it was 0-1, and I believe I'd won 2 bracelets. So the problem is I'd started talking about history the night before. NPR was there, National Public Radio,
right.
And they were interviewing me, and I said something which, I wish I wouldn't have said in retrospect, because it got me cocky.
Yeah.
And I knew they didn't know a lot about poker, and I said, man, if I can win this, I'll be the greatest of all time.
And we're going to talk...
Because I'd already won 2 bracelets then, and I said that right in NPR. If I can win this, I'll be the greatest of all time. Little did I know, Benny Banian,
Benny, yeah.
Benny Banian, the son,
the
grandfather of Jack Binion,
right.
told me that if I won that main event, they were going to put me straight in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And so he told me that after I busted, and I was just, it was just brutal to finish 5th there. And some other weird thing happened to me too. We came back, and right away I raised with ace queen suited, and Dewey moved in, and I didn't notice that he had an extra like 150,000 and 25K chips. I didn't notice. And so I said, I call. And he had ace king, and his hand held up. And I was just like, whoa, he had 260? And, it was, maybe my fault for not knowing, but I just remember thinking it really cost me that, because I would have folded because he was the tightest player ever.
Yeah, Dewey was, people don't realize, back then, there was, and I tell people all this, there's about 6 or 7 of us that understood no limit very well. We knew how to pick up chips. We knew how to pick up dead money. We basically got our chips by how people size their bets up, and that's why I always like to tell people, like, I wish card runners never taught people bet sizing, because we learned how to read people by basically the way they threw their chips in. So I look back at that 0-1 final table. I know when Carlos bluffed me, and then I went broke. Everything in between that was a blur until the final hand where Dewey trapped Carlos with aces, and Carlos sucked out and made a straight and won the tournament. But everything else was a blur because I was too busy wanting to just jump off a dam for letting Carlos bluff me when I knew he had nothing. But, yeah, that was interesting tournament. I look back also, I remember, back in, I think it was 99 or 2000, we were playing at it was, because I was becoming a pretty good 08 player, and we were playing some 150-300, and I had not played in any no limit tournaments yet, and you and Huck were head up at the Rio Carnival of Poker. Do you remember that?
Yeah. That was one of the ones you wanted to win. That was a big tournament, man.
Yeah.
Huge field.
But I didn't know how to play no limit yet, and I didn't jump in it. But I remember this is one thing that I remember from that tournament more than anything in the world, and is when Mike Sexton said to me, he said, "These two are so far above everyone else that it's not even close. And I'd like to make a wager that one of these two wins the World Series of Poker at least one more time each." And Huck had won it in '96, and then the very next year when I jumped into playing No Limit Hold'em is when we had gotten to the final table in '01, and I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember running around because there was like 6 of us that were really good at, and we were really aggressive. And I'm like, let me go see what Phil's doing. Let me see this table draw. And I'll never forget this. I walked up to your table, and then there was Phil, raise. And back then, like, you were able to run people over. I was able to run people over, and like we'd raise 80% of the top. And I watched you raise all 9 hands, and I looked at your stack, and then I went back to my table and they go, "How's Phil doing?" I go, "He's doing pretty good. I just watched him raise 9 hands in a row." And I was just like, okay, me and Phil are going to end up being at this final table. I thought Daniel would be too. Daniel kind of got it really unlucky, actually, against the German, I think it was, German guy.
Well, I mean, the German guy overplayed sixes.
Sixes, correct. Yeah. Sixes, yeah.
And they put in just like 600,000 each, and Daniel had ace king.
Yeah, I remember.
And I'd watch Daniel get there almost as much as anybody else in poker, And so I thought, all right, somehow he's going to hit it, and it came 10-jack.
Yeah, I remember.
But everybody was shocked when the river was a blank.
Yeah, and the thing is people don't understand. We'll give them a little bit of an idea. Is like back then, you didn't start with a zillion chips, and like small pocket pairs, unless you had like loads of chips, you didn't play them really. It was like 4s, 3s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s. It's like somebody opens, you just throw it in the muck, because when they open, the worst they had were 2 overs, and you just didn't want to. I mean, you just weren't playing.
It was stunning to see 6s in that era.
Yeah,
in '01 for all that money.
I remember the hand. Yeah, it was.
And then and I think everybody felt like if you get it on with 6s, you don't deserve to win the pot either.
Yeah,
we all felt like.
and I remember the look on mine and Daniel's face. We were talking. It was like, how can he put all these money in with 6s? Yeah, and back, you couldn't, like, it just. I'm trying to let the listeners try and understand that, that back then you didn't start with, it was chip for chip, and the chip leader of the main event had like, I don't know, 50 big blinds. What they cry about being short was a chip leader back then. So that's,
yeah, I think you're a little bit off, but I mean,
maybe
you're right. It's not 50. I mean, sometimes you have 100, but the point is,
never more than 100 though. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, you and I have different memories.
Yeah. Oh, maybe.
Always bet on it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't. Hey,
I
listen.
happen to have something in my study that says the chip lead after day 1, 2, and 3, and 4 when I won it. The 1, 2, and 3. We can bet right now.
No, I just know that when the guy had the 6s, it was just unbelievable. I mean, the look on Daniel's face and the look at all of our faces were like, I mean, my heart went out for Daniel because I wanted all of 3 of us at the final table with Carlos, and it would have been just incredible.
Nobody was rooting against Daniel.
No,
I mean, it would have been. Nobody was rooting against Daniel. I mean, I knew how tough he was.
Yeah, no,
but it still would have been fun to be down there with him.
And back then, the World Series of Poker used to pay ESPN to televise the main event. They used to pay like $85,000, I think it was, and now ESPN is paying the World Series of Poker a lot of money. I don't know exactly what it is, but just how times have changed. But okay, so let's touch a little bit forward to what I consider one of the most epic final tables ever that me and you were at, the 2005 Tournament of Champions that I won. I always tell people to go back and watch the video of our final table because three-handed, it was really, I believe, one of the best three-handed poker ever. I played the best I was capable. I thought you played just as good. Hoyt played just as good.
The difference is, Mike, you still weren't quite at your top of you played really well in that event for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching you for a couple of days. I got to the chip lead early and I never gave it up. I just sat there and never was in trouble. Just watched you guys all just give your money away and splash and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And and I remember even at that final table, which was televised,
right.
I didn't play a hand for the first hour.
I remember that.
And when I finally did re-raise, I had ace king. I thought I'd make a point by betting it all and waking everybody up to who I was. And so I moved all in, and which was risky with ace king. You had raised or somebody had raised, and I just re-raised all in. And I just remember, all right, that'll wake everybody up and let them know I'm there because I didn't play a hand for an hour. And then all of a sudden, but I remember that I moved my chips really well that day. And I remember there was a time where I knew you were bluffing, and I would have picked you off.
But you had Danneman behind me.
I had Danneman behind me, who I thought had ace-queen, who then folded ace-queen.
Yeah. You
made a move with king 10, and I'm
no,
like,
I made a move with an 8-3 offsuit.
That's different. That's a different time.
Oh, okay.
You want to talk about that hand next? Fine. But Danneman then folded ace-queen. I just thought, well, Danneman's going to pick him off surely, but not everybody saw what I saw. So I folded, and he folded, and he showed king 10, and I was like, yeah, of course. And I was kind of upset because Danneman didn't call. But, I mean, who can you expect? I can't expect everybody to have my reading abilities. He thought he was making a tough laydown,
Yeah.
But I just looked at you. I had studied you the day before, which had never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
But it just so happened that we're staying at Caesars, and I turned on the television, and I saw it picked up a tell on you, and I said, I'm going to use this. And then we got down to three-handed, and I just remember hours passing. And finally, and I, of course, accumulated the chip lead again with Hoyt Corkins, who's been my biggest nemesis as far as him and Ivy have been the luckiest against me.
Mm-hmm.
The luckiest in just weird situations all the time. I remember I picked up ace-queen and Hoyt had aces. And,
I think you had ace-king, didn't you?
Three-handed.
Was it ace? You had ace-king,
I remember,
when he had the aces.
I remember raising with ace-8, and I wasn't paying attention to the blinds. I just changed, so I raised a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And because I raised a little bit less, you made a move with 8-3 offsuit.
Right.
And I studied for 3 or 4 minutes thinking you were bluffing.
I remember. I was fucking holding my breath. I was like, please, God, fold.
You had 8-3 offsuit. I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm going to bust Mike anyway. I don't need to make this call. He's going to give it to me anyway later when I have a calling hand.
Right.
And that was a mistake because if I call you, you had 8-3 offsuit, and Hoyt had 8-3.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only 2 threes left. You're probably out of the tournament.
Yeah.
But you did try to bust yourself a couple of times later, and I remember you had ace-queen against Hoyt's ace-king in a spot
that was
a spot that was harder.
Yeah, that was a tough spot.
But you guys were really deep, and I remember you screaming one time, and it came 10-10-4, and I thought, all right, Mike's out of here. I'm surprised he has a hand as good as ace queen, because
And
usually he bluffed it off.
And then it came a queen on the turn, which put 3 diamonds, and everybody was going crazy, and I wasn't going crazy.
The room was just, it was crazy.
Because Hoyt still had ace king with the ace of diamonds, so he could still win with a jack, a king, or a diamond, and everybody's going crazy, and I'm just like, that
room was full of people, and everybody's screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
And we're live on, I remember ESPN filming it. Poker was just catching its.
Right.
And I remember your ace queen somehow sucked out, and so instead of heads up with Hoyt, we're 3-handed. And then I suggested we make a save.
Yeah.
And Hoyt wasn't really excited by it. You didn't care. But we did. We made a save, so we made it 3-handed. We took like 300,000 each or something, whatever it was. And then we continued playing. So there are a lot of times where I finished second, third, or fourth. There was a deal involved, which was standard back in those days.
Yeah.
But I remember just being so frustrated with Hoyt, because just all these times he's all in and all in and all in, and I just never had anything to pick him off.
I remember.
And I finally pick up ace queen, and he has aces.
I told this story because I was really he was real aggressive on the button 3 hands. So I was like, I spent 20 minutes just studying his hands, right? Like his hand movements. And I finally after, I don't even know, maybe a couple hours, I picked up a tell on him where when he put his chips in, he'd put him in like sideways when he was big, and he would put him in front, like one in top of each other forward when he wasn't. And I'll never forget the hand. I thought you had ace king, but you said ace queen. Maybe I was wrong. But that when he put it in sideways, I said, "Fuck, Hoyt's got like aces or kings here." And I said, and I think I had like king queen or queen jack or suited or something where I would have called a raise. And I said, "No, he's got a big. I'm telling you, he's got a big hand here." And I folded, and then you had moved all in, and Hoyt snapped, and I said, "I fucking
no."
Knew
He had ace queen suited. I had like 660,000, as I recall, and he had like 260.
Yeah.
And I remember I still had just been waiting for him. I still had never moved them all in.
Right.
And I do when he shows up with aces, and I had ace queen suited. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, this guy, he held over me for so long, Mike. Even, I'll never forget one time I took a jet to Tunica with Ivy.
Mm-hmm.
Just the two of us. We arrive at 5 in the morning. We go and play, and now it's on day 2 of the main event. And Hoyt raises, and I finally re-raised him. It felt like I'd played like 400 hands. And he moves in anyway, just quickly, and I snap it off with 9s. And he shows the ace 7 of spades or ace 8 of spades or something. And it comes deuce 3 5, spade spade.
Of course.
And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And
that was the year Hoyt was on fire.
I also thought, what is he fucking thinking? I mean, I haven't re-raised a guy in like 300 hands. What are you moving in? Ace 6 of spades yet? Yeah. I thought, why are you moving in with ace 6 of spades? Well, I couldn't believe it. And he was raising every hand, and he had the chip lead. And the one guy he had to stay away from, he just couldn't help it. He was going to double me up. Huge pot, and if I win that pot, I have a great chance at the WPT down there.
For a lot of people out there, that don't know who Hoyt Corkins is. Hoyt Corkins was, I guess, big-time player back when in the late 80s, early 90s, who took, 10 years off of poker. He came back in approximately 2003 or 2004, and he was super aggressive, loved to play big pot poker, and I think he won a WPT, and he won a lot of stuff, and he was big time for about 3 years.
No, Mike, you got to give Hoyt credit. Hoyt is a great player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't misunderstand me. He's a great player, but sometimes when a guy's a great player and they don't know how to slow down, then I'm like, all right, these are my guys.
Right.
I love playing against these great players that never slow down, because I always trap them. I would just cut down my range. And then all of a sudden, all the money's in, and they're in trouble every time. But Hoyt, great player. I still remember, Mike, when when it came 9-6 deuce, and he and I were filming one of the first WPTs ever on the East Coast, and I had Jack 9, and he had Jack 7 offsuit, and he went ahead and raised me on the flop, and 7 on the turn, bet big again, and 7 on the river. And I remember the flash.
Oh, these stories are great.
And I just was...
Man, I thought I've heard all of Phil Hellmuth's bad beat stories over the years. These are new ones for me, so these are good.
They flashed the graphic that I was like 600 to 1 favorite or something like that. And I was just like, are you kidding me? And I just was in shock at what he's gotten away with against me. So maybe he thinks he's lucky against me, and he doesn't think he has to slow down.
It's funny you say that, because back in the day, we, like most of the good players, had a respect for each other, especially if we had a weak table that we could run over. We used to always, we didn't really want to get involved with the other aggressive player. At least I didn't. I think you feel the same way. And we would kind of take turns running over the table, and we'd stay out of each other's way. And that's when the hand happened with Raymer in 04, when I said, I got big cojones, you got little cojones, stay the fuck out of my way. We had basically, me and Raymer are good friends right now, so that's all been behind us. But the point is we had a table we could run over, and I was raising 3-4 pots in a row, and then I would let him raise 3-4 pots in a row, but then he started coming after me, and I'm just like, motherfucker, we got this easy fucking table, and you just want to keep coming after me. I'm gonna fuck you, and that's how I used to think back then, get the fuck out of my way, this is my table, and I'll give you some of this table, but as long as I'm here, I want this table. So that's kind of that's why.
Well, you thought that way. Gus Hansen thought that way. Gus would be like, "This is my table." And when I came to this table, what you guys didn't understand is that I would always just adjust.
Yeah.
When it was at your table, then I'd slow way down. When I was at Gus's table, I'd slow way down.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do.
And I'd just kind of stay out of the way, and just because I knew also they'd break tables in a couple of hours, and I knew also that if we're going to play a big pot, you guys are going to be in trouble. So I felt like.
And when you just said that is something that me and you talk about in No Limit Hold'em all the time. We don't really like to give out our thought process, because people will always think that we don't know what we're talking about, but to the day I die, I know we do. But I always tell people, and a couple of years ago it cost me who knows what it could have cost me in the tournament, but I always tell people, if you have a tough table, you just got to sit back and play more solid and pick your spots, and try and advance to the next day and get a better table draw. And if the worst thing that you could ever do is try and press the action when you're at a tough table. And we both have done it when we told ourselves not to, and it's cost us, because we get frustrated that we're not allowed to be the table captain or be able to, open pots, because, there's so many great players behind us or wherever. But it's really for people out there, young kids out there watching, I'm not going to give away too much, but I will say good advice is, if you get a bad table, don't force the action. Try and get yourself through the day, and I promise you the table draw the next day will be better. And if it's not, well, it's probably not meant for you to win that tournament. So that's a good thing you said. Anyways, I'm going to touch on a couple more things. We're going to go to 2011. It's I call it the bracelet in a box. It's when me and you had become really good friends, and they decided to sequester everybody at the Rio. This is before, the internet was how it is today, and they didn't know how to run a delay or televise it, so they were worried about the result, people seeing the whole card, so they sequestered only family members when Phil was playing for bracelet number 11, and I went completely fucking crazy on the Rio and the tournament staff. I'm like, this is fucking bullshit. Phil's playing for number 11, and you guys won't let us to watch, and I'm throwing a fit. They had to hold me back with security, and I don't know if you remember me outside the box screaming, "Go Phil!" still
remember,
go.
Oh, for sure I do. I could hear you screaming outside the box about being sequestered. I thought the whole thing was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I handled myself really poorly to start that final table. I remember that.
Right.
I had the chip lead. Rick Fuller had the chip lead. I was second in chips. My friend Morgan McKenna was there at that final table. And I remember I was just so, I came out with bitter beer face. Too much whining, too much blah, 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 blah. Things weren't going well. I had all the pressure.
Right.
Chan had 10 bracelets. Cyril had 10 bracelets.
Well, that's why it was so
I had
big
10 bracelets.
because this was for the bracelet lead. It wasn't like, Phil had everybody. There was 2 people that already had 10, and so this was really.
Most of the listeners don't know how good that bracelet race was. They don't know that. I think it was 2003. Chan Brunson and I won 5 bracelets between us.
Wow.
I mean, we were crushing. There were 40 tournaments. We were crushing. We kept climbing. Another crush, another one, another one. I mean, it was crazy to watch us kind of zigzag back and forth with the lead. And I remember my chance to take the bracelet lead the first time was heads up against Scotty in Omaha 8 or better. I had 500K to hit.
I remember
50K.
that. Oh my God.
And I flipped out.
Scotty,
I was like, wow.
As much as
history here.
Yeah, as Scotty was back then, he was probably the best Omaha 8 player in the world back then. And I remember your guys' head up match, and I was thinking, man, I don't think Phil's going to beat Scotty, but you played great, and you had him on the ropes, and then he sucked out on a
all
hand.
All I can say is this: I had him on the ropes.
I remember.
At one point, he gave me so much action in the hand.
I remember.
Okay. I'll never forget the hand. It should have been the last hand. He put in so many bets against me in this hand. I looked at him and I felt sorry for him. I said, I think he's a little drunk.
He probably was. It's Scotty.
Because then at that exact moment, they changed dealers.
Wow.
And Scotty and I had not made a deal yet.
Right.
And so we were still $100,000 in play. And I was a little suspect of what happened. Because the very first hand out of the box, they dealt me the ace 4, 5, 6, and it came ace 3, 5, and somehow he had the deuce 4, and we got it all in, and I missed everything. I had a lot of a lot of tie cards, and a lot of half cards, right?
Right.
And I missed everything, and I just remember thinking, whoa, that just felt a little cold. They sat down with a brand new dealer and a brand new deck.
Right.
And the very first hand, and it was just what I felt bad for him. Now, I'm not saying anything happened, but there are a couple times in my life where I'm like, fuck. And not that Scotty would be aware of it. I know who he was getting staked by back then, and I don't want to say their names.
Right.
But I wish I would have just made the deal. Maybe I have that bracelet.
Yeah, maybe.
And maybe it's just my imagination. Shit happens, and Scotty's great. And I was smart after about 5 minutes of getting beat up. I asked for a 20-minute break, and I came back when there was a new dealer.
That's funny. Like nowadays, do you even pay attention? You don't probably even know who's in the box, do you? Like back then, a lot.
I didn't know who was. All I know is they sat down. It just looked like he was going to blow it. It just looked. The hand he lost to me, he lost way too many bets. I remember I had ace, deuce, 9, 10, and it came. It came 5, 8, queen with 2 diamonds, and I just remember in those days. I had watched, I could have just said, all right, let's put in the 100,000, let's gamble. And Scotty would have said, okay, probably. And I remember the turn was a 5 and we put in 1 million bets.
Yeah.
And the river was a 4 and he check raised me again and I re-raised him. I didn't think he had ace deuce.
Yep.
And so I just won this massive pot and I hit the running, wheel. And so I just remember saying, wow, that just sucks. The first hand out. And so, Two mistakes. One, you should never be worrying about dealers.
Right.
And 2,
I never do.
Never feel sorry for an opponent ever.
Yeah.
Because he came back and beat me. And
I do remember you had him.
And even
on
if
the
I'm
felt.
whining about one hand and one dealer, I do remember that I took a 40-minute break, and there was a new dealer, and somehow I didn't win that one.
Well,
but I also remember how heady it was. So let me cut back, Mike, because.
Yeah.
There's been a little bit too much negativity for my liking. So let's go back to the one where you were whining and I was going for bracelet number 11.
Right. Yes, that's what I want to get back to. Let's
go back
to
that. I
that.
started a little whiny there at that final table. And then Morgan Machina was brilliant. About an hour, and he's like, "You guys are sequestering us? Then we expect you to pay for a nice dinner." And then Rick Fuller's like, "Yes, we want sushi, and we want this, and we want that." And I'm like, "Yes." And all of a sudden, we all kind of united as a table. And I remember all of a sudden there was a lot of positivity there, and I felt much better, and I just stopped whining about stuff. And I remember that dinner, there was only 2 tables in the room, you know, and it was like we all basically ate together.
Oh,
you know?
I remember.
And we all talked. And there was no.
Yeah,
like,
they wouldn't
no
let you guys.
nothing.
They wouldn't let you guys not be together because you were sequestered. Because they were worried about somebody finding out about hands because they didn't know. Like back again, this was so scary. That's like 8 years ago, and which is nothing. And where technology has come today in poker is pretty amazing. But I wanted to bring that up because. I remember me going crazy, almost getting kicked out of the Rio.
Yeah.
And because I felt because so much history was on the line, that they were taking it away from the fans and from the players. And you guys were basically sequestered in a box. So I went nuts on my original Mouthpiece about it. And then you ended up coming out victorious. And I think we had a drink together afterwards, and I was pretty happy for you. And that was a
well, that was great because those days Chan and Brunson were in the room,
right?
And so that's what the modern guys haven't seen. They haven't seen Chan and Brunson. So Chan and Brunson were there every day. You know, they were playing. They were in the trenches next to me playing for bracelets. We were all playing for history,
right?
And I remember Chan and Brunson awarded me bracelet number 11, and they both had huge smiles on their faces.
Right.
And that meant something to me. You know?
Should.
It meant something to me to have them hand me the bracelet and for me to take the lead. And then you didn't see Doyle playing as many events, and you didn't see Johnny playing as many events. And, you know, one reason why is because they can go play high-stakes poker at the Aria or the Bellagio. And, you know, and I know that, you know, those guys are probably averaging in the neighborhood of between $10,000 and $35,000 a day in wins.
Right.
You know, because they were so much better than everybody else. We were all so much better in so many games. And so, you know, if you wanted cash, you wanted bracelets, you know, and a lot of people in poker, a lot of reasonable people choose the cash. And, you know, I've heard you when you had a lot of money coming in from Full Tilt, you said, I care about bracelets. And then, you know, 2 years ago, you're like, I only care about the cash. So
well, and when I first started off in '97,
you want a bracelet, but I think it's easier when you have a little cash. So
yeah, I think I won a bracelet. I think it was when I won my, was it 2008 or maybe no, it was. Well, I think it was either 2008 or 2013 when I won the stud 8. Anyways, I had won a bracelet, and I was whining to you, and you're like, Mike, you want a bracelet? And I was like, I don't give a shit. I want a fucking cash. I got fucked here and fucked there. And I remember that conversation we were having. It was pretty funny. He's like, what are you complaining about?
I remember one time, Mike, you won a bracelet, the deuce to 7 bracelet.
Yeah, it was a deuce in 08. I thought it was 08. Yeah.
You put a really bad beat on somebody. You decided to move all in or something, and
well, I was at the final table. I had a read.
The final table.
I had a read on Lissandro, and then I re-raised like really big because I knew he had nothing, and then Eric Lindgren woke up and 4-bet all in, and I thought he has to be Pat. I mean, I was playing pretty solid, and I remember I told Eric that I had a 10-9, but basically I had like King, Queen, 3-7-8 or King 3-7-8 in my hand. I ended up telling him a couple of years later, you know, what really happened.
You drew
there.
2.
Yeah, and he drew one.
I think he actually drew 1.
He drew 1. He was drawn to a wheel.
Shocking.
Yeah. Actually, I could have drew 1 to it. I think that's what it was. It was King. I had King 10, 8, 7, 3, and then I'm deciding like, should I draw 1 to a 10? I go, this guy, I might be drawing 2 to the 8, 7, 3. And so I drew 2 and he drew 1. I was like shocked. He had deuce 3, 5, 7 or whatever I had 2 perfect cards, and he bricked, and I won that event, and then I went in the tournament. Yeah, I remember that hand like it was yesterday. But
you were, rather than celebrating after you won the bracelet, you were still talking about that hand and complaining. And
I was complaining about another tournament I just got knocked out of, probably the World Omaha or something, 8 or better. He's like, you were like, stop complaining, you just won $586,000 and a bracelet. I go, I don't give a shit. I'm pissed about this or something. I remember you fucking getting in my case for whining after I just won a bracelet and $586,000. But back then, that's what me and you had. I know we have a competitive edge in us. The thing that people don't understand is okay, you might sometimes lose your cool against somebody and then apologize, but they don't understand the competitive fire that we both have. I don't think anybody in poker shows up and wants to, well, they all want to win, but I don't know if they really want to win as much as we want to win when it comes to at the World Series. There's years where I don't want to be there, and those are the years I've done bad. But ever since I've wanted to be there, and I tell all the young kids, you can't go out partying, you can't go out drinking. Use that. Go do that after the World Series. Get your sleep, get on a regiment, and go there after you take a bad beat and tell yourself, I can't wait to get back the next day. I know it's the hardest thing to do, but if you want to be successful at the World Series, it's what you have to do.
The Mouthpiece.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our interview with Phil Hellmuth. Come back tomorrow for part 2 with our amazing interview with 15-time poker bracelet winner Phil Hellmuth.
The Mouthpiece.